What's going on? The Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the preview edition, taking a look at some racing from this upcoming weekend. Delaware Park has a big weekend, arguably their biggest weekend. You've got the Delaware Handicap as well as the Kent. We'll take a look at both of those graded stakes races. We'll also take a look at the main event from Belmont Park, the Forbidden Apple, and quickly touch on a race north of the border at Woodbine, specifically for one horse, but we'll get to that at the end of the show. If you listen podcast form like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, and Spotify. If you listen over on YouTube, click that subscribe button. You'll get all the latest offerings from DRF TV. Give us a thumbs up. Greatly appreciated. Same thing goes for iTunes. Write us a little review. Give us a positive rating. Really appreciate it. I got a little bit of feedback about last week's preview edition, and we're going to kind of stick with that mold where perhaps we don't go through and we don't do all the value lines and all that stuff, and I saved that for Saturdays on DRF Live. But I did get some feedback from some people that still liked the idea of hearing picks, or how you would, not necessarily picks, but plays. How would you go about allocating money? How would you bet things? So we won't go with graphics for that per se, but I'll verbalize it in some instances. And let's start it off with the first race that we'll go over. Race number 9 at Delaware on Saturday, 1.25 miles on the main track. This is the Grade 2 Delaware Handicap. You've got a pretty good field in here. It's worth noting, it sounds like Farrell, the number 7, is not going to go. Wayne Catalano said she's probably not going to run in this spot, so that takes out a pace factor in a spot like this. But there should still be quite a bit of speed signed on in here, and really this race boils down to one horse. The number 6, Elate for Bill Mott. She's making her first start as a 4-year-old, and we have not seen her since the Breeders' Cup Distaff last year, in which she went off as the 2-1 favorite, which, when you go back and look at that, not suggesting that she didn't deserve favoritism, but boy, that's a pretty significant accomplishment in and of itself. If you look at going off as the favorite in a race as being an accomplishment, I kind of do. It makes, look, the public clearly thinks that you're something. When you went off favorite over Forever Unbridled and Able Tasman and Paradise Woods, and you name it, that was a pretty good group last year. So Elate, she had all the sort of mojo working in her favor going into the distaff, and unfortunately, it just didn't work out for her, and she ran a decent 4th. But it really boils down to her best races are simply better than anyone else in this field is capable of producing, as evident by the run 2 starts back. We're going to go back and look. This is the stretch run of last year's Beldame, in which she was just visually unbelievable.
Quarters in 112.1. They're into the stretch. Money's on. Charlotte has taken the lead. Elate still has no place to go. Asking for money is there on the outside. Can Elate get through? She's trying to squeeze through a slim opening here. And through the eye of a needle, here she comes. And Elate has charged through to take the lead, and she is taking off for the wire, leaving the others behind. Elate dominates the Beldame. Oh, she was sharp today. She won it by 7.
So if she does something like that, she's going to win. But there are some reasons to have some concerns, at least in my opinion. You haven't seen her in 8 months. That's red flag number 1. She had a little bit of an injury issue, took her some time to get back to the run. Number 2, I don't question her ability at longer distances. I actually think she wants longer distances. But at the end of the day, we're still talking about trying to go 1.25 miles off of a layoff, an 8-month layoff. That's no small feat. I mean, that's a pretty significant thing that you got to overcome. If she runs her best race, she's going to win this race. Pretty cut and dry. But I from a gambling standpoint, I just can't possibly be picking her on top, knowing that she's going to be arguably odds on. And you know what? If she wins, great. She's supposed to. And if she doesn't, there's going to be some other opportunities. It's worth noting for me anyway, I look at this race and say the one horse that I just don't want any part of, and I acknowledge she could win this race, is Unbridled Mo. I don't think she wants the distance. I think there's a reason that they have campaigned her at those middle distances, even one-turn races predominantly throughout her career, because I shouldn't say predominantly. She's gone 2 turns a number of times, but I just feel like she's better at those sort of shorter distances. And if they thought that she could go this sort of distance, they would have tried it at some other point in the career. I don't want Unbridled Mo in here. Mopetism, I've always been a fan of hers, but at the end of the day, she's no great shake. She's 3 of 19 lifetime. I've always thought distance would be her friend as well, but she's just kind of a grinder. And again, at a middling price, she doesn't really do anything for me in a race like this. A horse that I have also always liked, and I wonder if she's just finally coming into her own, is going to be my pick in this spot. That's the number 1, Teresa Z. Teresa Z goes out for Anthony Margata Jr. We're going to go back and look at the stretch run of the Obeah most recently. This is the local prep for the Delaware Handicap. I loved everything she did. She rallied into slow fractions, and she drew away at the end. I like the fact that it looks like she had plenty of gas left in the tank on the gallop out. And to me, again, if you're not convinced that Elate is going to be ready to go, and regardless, she's probably not going to be a great bet in this instance, depending on what you think of her chances. If you don't think Unbridled Mo can get the distance, if you don't think Mopatism is good enough, why not take a shot with a horse that the distance looks like it's going to work, looks like she's on an upward trajectory as far as ability is concerned, and she's going to be a square number. I believe she's 10-1 on the morning line. Perhaps with the scratch of Farrell, she comes down a little bit, but you're going to get at least 7 or 8-1, I would imagine, in a race like this, if not more than that. So to me, Teresa Z, she is the pick and basically the bet for me. So I'll play some sort of a win wager on her as well. And I'll probably, I shouldn't say probably, got to take a look and see what the probables look like. I may back her up with an Elate Teresa Z exacta, simply because I do think Teresa Z is going to appreciate the distance. But it really boils down to what version of Elate are you going to get? Elate, her best race, simply better than everyone else's in this group. The big fades for me in this spot, I suppose, would be Unbridled Mo and Mopatism. But for me, it's a 1-6 exacta in the 9th race at Delaware on Saturday afternoon. I'm going to go with Teresa Z to get the job done in the 10-furlong Delaware Handicap. Race prior to the Delaware Handicap Saturday is the Kent Stakes for 3-year-olds, going 1 mile and 1/8 on the turf course. There's already been a defection in this spot. The number 8, Blame the Rider. He goes in the Indiana Derby on Saturday night for Doug O'Neill on the main track. So you take out a pace factor in a race like this. This race to me boils down to, do you want the horses that look like they are on sort of an upward trajectory, or do you want the horse, really, there is one, that has been proven against better horses and has been keeping better company? That horse I'm talking about is the number 5, Untamed Domain for Graham Motion. Now, as a 2-year-old, he looked like he could turn into anything, and his final race as a 2-year-old was very, very impressive. We're going to take a look at that run right now. Keep an eye out for those West Point Thoroughbred silks on the far outside. Here's the stretch run of last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf.
Domain hooked about 8 wide, but Untamed Domain running on, homeward bound, and at Sands of Marley, Mendelssohn hooks off the rail, and here comes Mendelssohn with a powerful run now down the centre of the track. Untamed Domain is running on gamely as well, and Voting Control comes late, but Mendelssohn in full flight for the wire, and Mendelssohn will go all the way. Mendelssohn and Ryan Moore have won it. Untamed Domain was second.
Now, I thought that was going to be the beginning of bigger and better things for him as a 3-year-old. But unfortunately, I don't think he's taken a true step forward from 2 to 3. I think he just continues to run a similar race. Now, perhaps that's good enough to win in a spot like this. He's getting class relief. We talked about it a little bit. That most recent run, you can go over on the stakes previews on video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Forms YouTube channel. The Pennine Ridge, that race has come back very strong. I was wrong about it going into it and coming out of it. You've got to acknowledge when you're wrong, otherwise you'll make a mistake. That race has come back very good. You had Catholic Boy and Analyze It. They came back and ran 1-2 in the Belmont Derby. But more importantly, I think, you had Channel Cat come back and run 4th and earn a 90 buyer. So Untamed Domain has very clearly been keeping strong company. But from a speed figure standpoint, I don't think he's improving all that much. Maybe he just needs a little bit of a class sort of relief like he's going to get on Saturday, and maybe that'll be all the difference. But to me, I understand he ran second 2 starts back in that American Turf, and he didn't run great in that most recent start, but he was a little bit closer to the pace than I think he wanted to be. I just don't think he's taken a tremendous step forward. So I want some other fresh faces in this spot, and you can go with a few different ones. I'm sure a lot of people are going to look at the number 2 Hot Springs for Asmussen and Fergal Lynch and say, you know what, this one's paired up by her tops and facing older horses. He makes a lot of sense, and I'm not going to argue with that. I just kind of feel like he's going to be a little bit of an underlay, and I hated how he finished that last race. I know he opened up at the end of it, but he was on his left lead for the better part of 1/8 of a mile, and that to me it just doesn't bode well, in my opinion. I'm interested in 2 horses. I think the number 1, Carrick, is very interesting for Tom Morley. I like what he's done up in New York in 2 lifetime starts. But the horse I'm most interested in is Golden Brown. And I know that may seem a little bit silly, but Golden Brown, I believe he's the longest shot on the board as far as the morning line is concerned, or pretty darn close to it. If he's not the longest, he's the second longest. He has the highest last out buyer in the field. He has the highest last out raw time form US rating, not factoring the pace. And we're going to take a look at the stretch run of the Dan Horn most recently. This was his first time going 2 turns, first time on turf, and he was taking on some pretty good older horses. Here's the stretch run.
Turning for home with a 3-length lead. Chunnel is racing in second. The pink cap of Don's Marsh surfacing in between horses. Golden Brown finishing with some interest. He takes second now. Irish Straight, a 4-length lead. A big effort from Golden Brown, who's closing ground fast. Irish Straight, Golden Brown, Irish Straight. Too much for them in the Dan Horn.
That horse that beat him or finished ahead of him, Irish Straight. Irish Straight's a graded stakes winner, older, on turf. He only got beat by a half length. And I love the way that he was finishing. Now, perhaps this is going to be too much for him, but I have to be honest. I think this is almost like a comparable sort of class move. The difference is if you think that one of these other lightly raced horses, whether it is, Hot Springs or Carrick, or let's say it's the European import for Clement, Duke de Calais, if you think any of them take a giant step forward, then sure, maybe he's in trouble. But from what he's done so far on the track with that one effort on the turf, I think Golden Brown has as good a chance as anyone to win a race like this. Maybe I'm vastly overrating him, but sometimes I think sometimes you have to stop overthinking it and looking at it from, well, he's facing X, Y, and Z, and that was a Jersey bred race. Look at it for what it is. Again, Irish Straight is a graded stakes winner on turf. He's an older horse, a solid older horse. He may not be a superstar, but he's a solid older horse. That was his first time going 2 turns, first time turf. He has the highest last out buyer in the field, highest last out raw time form US rating. And now that the 8 is gone, blame the rider, there's a scenario where Golden Brown might just inherit the lead. You know what? I think that he's just interesting to me, and I think he makes a lot of sense when if you took all the names and you took all that kind of stuff away and you just looked at it from a form standpoint and what they've done. I think you can make a case for Golden Brown having a big chance in here. So for me, he is the pick in this spot. I'm looking forward to betting him to win. We'll find out if he gets the job done. If he doesn't, there's a part of me, I understand Untamed Domain is the most likely winner of this race. At a short price, I want to be against him altogether. If I'm going to use anyone else, I'm going to use the one Carrick. I think Carrick is a good horse for Tom Morley. Morley's done some good things with these types over the past year. So to me, it's a 6-1 sort of situation. If I'm playing multi-race wagers, I'm going to use both of them probably equally. Then I'll back it up with Untamed Domain and also Hot Springs. But to me, I'm very interested in Golden Brown. Maybe I'm vastly overrating him and I'm thinking too highly of him, but I don't know. I just feel like I've broken it down pretty basically, and we'll find out if I'm right or not on Saturday afternoon. But to me, it's an interesting spot for a horse like Golden Brown. He's going to be a good number. I like him in the Kent at Delaware on Saturday. The main event at Belmont Saturday might not be a graded stakes race, but the quality of the field top to bottom is graded stakes caliber. Here it is. There's only 7 that are going to go in the Forbidden Apple this year. And really, it's a fascinating race because you've got horses that excel at shorter distances that are trying to stretch out to a mile. You've got horses that are proven at a mile. You've got horses that might want more distance than a mile. You've got horses shipping in from out of town, out of country even. It's an interesting sort of position here. I think it can go a few different ways. This race, though, begins with the defending champion. You have to look at Disco Partner, who most recently, all he did was earn a 105 buyer, winning the Jaipur again. He's an unbelievable sprinter for Christophe Clement. The question going into last year's Forbidden Apple was, would he successfully be able to stretch out to the mile distance? Well, sure enough, he was able to do so without breaking a sweat. Here's the stretch run of last year's Forbidden Apple.
Side of King Croesus, they turn for home, and Disco Partner comes alive to the outside of them. Bondurant is trying to put in a bid too. Here comes Disco Partner outside of King Croesus. Disco Partner takes the lead, takes off from King Croesus. Bondurant on the outside is next. Disco Partner's lengthening stride down to the wire. Oh yeah, he can stretch out. Disco Partner wins the Forbidden Apple with ease.
So we know that the distance isn't sort of any kind of an issue for this horse. If you think he takes a step forward here, or at least runs relatively close to what he did in the Jaipur, he's probably not going to lose. He also has tactical speed, which is going to be very, very important in a race like this because I think there's a ton of gas in here. And the fact that he can sit a little bit, he's not going to be one of those horses that's going to be dueling on the lead. I think he sits just off and he comes with his run. He's going to be very, very tough to beat in here. He's going to be a real short price, though. And I have to be honest, there are other horses in this race that I'm almost disappointed that they're running because I loved the effort from Voodoo Song most recently in the poker. I thought he ran way too well to lose. He was up there pushing those hot fractions. And I thought he stayed on pretty well, all things considered. Oscar Performance, we know what he's capable of, and Major Look is a decent horse as well. The problem is there's so much other speed in this race as well. I just don't think it helps a horse like Voodoo Song. You've got a horse in here like Blind Ambition, who you've got to imagine is going to be forwardly placed. I don't particularly love him, but he just kind of adds to the pace situation. Pocket Change. Pocket Change is fascinating. If you think he can successfully stretch out from 6 furlongs to 1 turn mile for Jason Service, we know Service, everything he touches turns to gold right now. But the problem again for him, I just don't know about this pace situation. Is he going to be too close to it, and is he going to cook his goose? I look at this race and say, you know what, I want a horse that's going to be able to sit a little bit off of it, if not toward the rear, and come on with a run. A horse that I also think, he's on the improve, and he's getting back to a preferred surface. He's going to be taking on much tougher horses, no question about it. But I've always liked Mr. Haverkamp. Mr. Haverkamp, to me, is the kind of horse that the jury is still out on what he is at this point, because I think he can truly be a graded stakes caliber horse. But the only time that they've tried him in a graded stakes race, that was the Saranac last year at Saratoga. And I just don't think that trip was ever very comfortable for him. He was in tight early on. He almost clipped heels. And then when he started, it didn't work out for him. He's run in 4 consecutive restricted stakes races. He's won 3 of them. I think the most important piece, though, about the most recent effort was back on June the 16th. That was his first start since December 2nd. So he'd been gone for quite some time. And it felt like that was nothing more than a means to an end. Let's get a little bit of a tightener into him. It's on synthetic. We know he's better on turf. Let's just kind of work him back into it. Well, all he did in the steady growth was go out and absolutely decimate a pretty decent field. Here's the stretch run of the steady growth.
Burning and King Gizmo, the defending champ in front. Mr. Haverkamp's come with a withering run, and Mr. Haverkamp has gone to the front. On the outside, running home is Where's the Widget, and Mr. Haverkamp racing away. Down the outside, Where's the Widget, King Sport behind, but it's Mr. Haverkamp, full of run and full of talent and full of promise. Mr. Haverkamp by 4 lengths. Where's the Widget second, King Gizmo third.
Now when you factor in the chance that he is, and I think firmly, better on turf than he is on synth. Second off the bench, you've had a couple of horses come out of that race and be next out winners. The 4th place finisher earned a 94 buyer in his next start, and the 7th place finisher a 79. I think Mr. Haverkamp is interesting. Now, maybe he turns into the wise guy horse in a race like this, where you've got Projected, who everyone's just going to say, well, it's Chad, he's going to take money. If people are looking for sort of the outsider, maybe it is Mr. Haverkamp, and all of a sudden he becomes an underlay. To me, I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing what he can do against better horses on Saturday. He may not be as good as Disco Partner, but I just at least want to see him run a competitive, respectable race to make me truly believe that he is graded stakes caliber, because I said it at the top, and it's true. This may not be a graded stakes race, but this is graded stakes caliber without question. To me, it's Mr. Haverkamp in this spot. I also want to use a little bit of Voodoo Song, and I want to use some Disco Partner. So I think the way that I'm going to play this race, I want to keep Mr. Haverkamp top and bottom as far as the exactas are concerned, maybe even trifectas as well. As far as multi-race wagers are concerned, Mr. Haverkamp, going to have a lot of him. I think you have to respect Disco Partner. He's the most likely winner of this race, no question about it. I also want to have a little bit of Voodoo Song. I haven't touched on Offering Plan just yet. My only concern with Offering Plan is that Kingston, the field was just kind of It's a New York bred race. I think he's a nice horse, but I thought he was just spinning his wheels on the far turn there for a minute. The good news is if you think that there's going to be a barbecue up front, this horse is going to appreciate it, and he's going to come with that late run. I don't love Offering Plan in here, but again, it's Chad. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this horse ran well. To me, the most intriguing horse in the race in the Forbidden Apple this weekend is Mr. Haverkamp. He is going to be my pick. I look forward to hopefully being able to bet him at a reasonable price and hooking him up with the more logical horses as well, a horse like Disco Partner, and even a little bit of Voodoo Song for Linda Rice. Last race on this week's preview edition is more almost like a horse watch, but the race is coming up, and we already talked about it. It's the Saturday Woodbine Play of the Day. You can head on over to the video.drf.com page or the Daily Racing Forms YouTube channel and see what Jeff Bratt and I think about this race. Really, it boils down to the outside horse, number 5, Armistice Day, 3-5 on the morning line. And what are you going to get out of this horse who was so unbelievable in the career debut? Let's first take a look back at the career debut before we talk about anything going forward. Here's the stretch run of a maiden special weight score for Armistice Day.
Home is Armistice Day with a very swift move down the outside. Armistice Day coming after these two, and Armistice Day swoops on them, takes over from both Tricky Magician and the Newfie Express, and is running away with the opener. Armistice Day, a big winner for the Barbara Minshall barn, and this first-time starter has scored by 4 lengths, maybe 5. The Newfie Express narrowly second from...
Now, considering that was first time out at odds of 6-1, earned a 73 Beyer speed figure, trained by Barb Minshall, who knows a thing or two about getting a horse ready to go and in a good spot. Just don't have to go that far back. Go back last year. She sent Dream It Is up to Saratoga, and she won the opening day co-feature anyway for the fillies in the Schuylerville. This horse, who knows what Declaration of War turns into as a sire, but he could act on the dirt. We saw that. He nearly won the Breeders' Cup Classic. He could act on synth. He could act on turf. You look at the damn Harmony Lodge. She was a Grade 1 winning dirt sprinter. She was also, on top of that, she won a boatload of graded stakes races. So this horse is bred to be a good horse. They paid almost $250,000 for him at Fasig-Tipton in August of 2017. The interesting thing is now we're wheeling back in 2 weeks. It'll be fascinating to see what you get. But if this horse does something comparable to what he did in the career debut. Also worth noting, a little bit odd though, Timeform US, the raw number for him was only an 89, and that's not the fastest in the race. But what you saw, he just kind of gives off the impression that he might actually be something going forward. I'm going to be very interested to see what we get from him on Saturday. He's not going to be any sort of a price. I'm not even suggesting to bet the race. If you do, I would probably just key him in multi-race wagers. But from a win standpoint, he's going to be 1-5. I don't have much interest in betting on a 1-5 shot that's a 2-year-old. But I think this horse, the upside is amazing, is tremendous. We'll find out what we get on Saturday. But based on what you just saw there in that maiden score 2 weeks ago, I think he could be a stone-cold runner. And Jeff Brad even mentioned something. Let's say he goes out there and struts his stuff Saturday afternoon. Timing of this race is going to be the second week in July. I know it's a long time, but maybe you wait. You've got a couple other options at Saratoga. Just because you're not ready to go for the Sanford on opening day, maybe you wait for a race like the Saratoga Special. I know that's a little bit of the shine has been taken off the Special recent years. Or maybe you wait for the duration and you wait until you get to closing weekend and you look at the Grade 1 hopeful. But again, one thing at a time. Armistice Day needs to go out there and do what he did in the career debut to really get people get the juices pumping and get people thinking this might be a serious racehorse. What we've seen already, he looks pretty darn good. We'll find out if he can handle taking on some different company anyway on Saturday afternoon north of the border at Woodbine. So a pick for me is Armistice Day, but again, from a betting standpoint, he's not going to offer a heck of a lot of value. More one to just throw in that horse watch. We'll see what he does. So that's been the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show. If you've been watching live.drf.com, livestream.com, Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, or the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook page, thank you for doing so. If you listen podcast form, like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. If you're on iTunes, write us a nice little review, give us a positive rating, all greatly appreciated. Normally, you would have already listened to the Players Podcast, but the boys are off this week. So without further ado, we will button this thing up and we'll throw it into the latest edition of Out of the Gate. Illman is off this week, so it's Beer and I anchoring things, and we'll go through a couple of nice races over the course of the weekend. Plenty of good stuff all over the place. You've got Derbies, Indiana, and Los Alamitos. You've got racing from Delaware. You've got racing from Woodbine. You name it. You've got it covered. All sorts of good stuff coming up this weekend. And again, if you are betting it, you should be doing it on DRF Bets. So best of luck this weekend, however you're playing, whatever you're playing, wherever you're playing. I'll be back on Tuesday recapping all the action from this upcoming weekend. Best of luck. This has been the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show.